Hello, everyone. So I've been to a few talks today, and I feel like we've learned a lot about quite specific 5G use cases and how they are being developed and scaled. And I thought I would talk today about what happens if all those use cases we've talked about are deployed really extensively, what would life be like in 2040, and what are the positives and negatives of that life, and therefore what should we be doing now to really maximize the positives and minimize the negatives. So I thought I'd set the scene to start with by just clarifying what technologies we're talking about here. And I really like the Urban Land Institute's way of looking at technology, which is in waves. So if we look at wave one, that was back in the 1990s. That was the advent of personal computers, the rise of internet content, connectivity into your home. And then as we move into wave two, in the early 2000s, we started to see social media, smartphones always being connected, massive rise in processing power by the cloud and big data. And we're now very firmly entrenched in wave three, which I believe is characterized by the Internet of Things and 5G. And together, I think those things enable a whole raft of future technologies that I see as being really impactful. Things like automation and robotics, private energy networks, 5G-enabled blockchain, additive manufacturing, but also further afield, looking at things in waves 4 and 5, things like the metaverse, maybe even brain physical interfaces. And so what I've done on the slides coming up is I've created a series of 3 future scenarios. So these are set in 2040, and they aim to look at what life would be like if 5G and all these other technologies were deployed extensively from an economic, social, and environmental perspective. And then hopefully we can start to understand, what we should be doing now in order to make that a prosperous future and maybe avoid some of the negative consequences. I will say that they are not completely factual. They are based on trends, but they are meant to be thought-provoking and hypothetical rather than precisely accurate. The first scenario we have is an economic scenario. So I want you to imagine in this one, we're in 2040, and 5G, automation, robotics have been deployed really extensively across a whole swathe of sectors, ranging from transport and logistics, health and social care, retail, and across all the professional services as well. And then I started to think, what would the positive outcomes of this be? Well, we can probably assume there'll be large-scale productivity increases, business growth. Those with the required digital skills might have a plethora of job opportunities. Maybe the robotics have even reduced some of the strain on our health and social care system caused by an aging population. And maybe even there's new wealth creation avenues being created, things like robotics ownership and leasing maybe, and the metaverse replicating, physical wealth creation avenues like real estate, but in the virtual world, and therefore early movers can prosper there as well. But then I started thinking about the negative consequences, and I think what happens if you don't have the digital skills to participate in this new economy? I think the World Economic Forum expects that the skills transition required for this digitization is going to be greater than the last industrial revolution. So got me thinking, as well as putting forward these use cases, how are we supporting people in communities to have the skills they need to make this transition so we don't end up with a heightened employment divide, wider inequality, and maybe growing feelings of unrest amongst the community that some have prospered and others haven't. Sorry. Then I thought I'd move on to the social scenarios. So again, here we're in 2040, and technology has had an impact on all kinds of our society, from how we participate in civic affairs, how public services are provided, but also how we spend our leisure time and socialize. So I think we've heard some talk today about things like the metaverse that allow you to have experiences that you never could have dreamed of, allow you to do everything from the comfort of your own home. So I think some of the positives from this scenario are it's really democratizing access to once-in-a-lifetime experiences. I think it's giving new levels of convenience. You can do what you want when you want from the comfort of your own home. And you can probably connect and find like-minded people more easily that don't have to be physically located around you. But I think on the negative side of things, what does that mean, kind of that heightened convenience mean for maybe health outcomes? If you're increasingly sedentary, what does that mean for physical health outcomes, maybe like obesity, but also maybe mental health outcomes? Maybe engaging remotely gives you, fulfills some of your social needs, but what about the intimacy of face-to-face interactions? Does that start to give rise to heightened levels of loneliness, social isolation, depression? I think we're starting to see some of that now. And also, are people, I think I saw a talk earlier about the amount of data that is collected on you in the metaverse, from how long you stare at things to your vital signals. Are people actually getting increasingly fed up of this constant cycle of data collection? And do people actually start to reject it and move back to a more kind of natural way of being? And lastly, I thought I'd discuss an environmental scenario. So in 2040, we can assume that maybe the population of the UK have seen, disaster after disaster, both locally, nationally, internationally, caused by climate change. And maybe now they really do put sustainability and responsible consumption at the top of their agenda. So here I thought I'd start thinking about, what is the role of 5G and 5G-enabled technologies in supporting the environmental agenda. I thought maybe 5G underpins digital twins of infrastructure and buildings and allows for really granular performance monitoring, automated optimization. Thought, what if people are getting increasingly frustrated by disrupted supply chains? They can't buy the food they want because crops have failed around the world. What does that mean for the role of 5G in supporting local self-sufficiency, maybe in agriculture? So what does that mean rurally? But also, do we start growing more food in urban locations with kind of technology-enabled urban farms, maybe? Then I started thinking, what is the role of 5G in local energy networks? So allowing the integration of renewables, balancing of supply and demand, and maybe even dynamic pricing based on that energy availability. And lastly, what is maybe the role of 5G in minimizing the need to travel? So allowing you to take holograms of yourself or virtual representations to events like this, maybe rather than having to physically travel, but still being able to have the ad hoc interactions that we like to have in the networking spaces. So hopefully those scenarios have shown that there's a huge amount to be excited about in the future that could be delivered by a 5G-enabled world. But there are some negatives, and I think it's important to be conscious of those. I think we often look at 5G from a very use case specific perspective, and I think it's interesting to look at the cumulative impacts of that. And so I thought we should maybe start looking about where we are now and how we start to bridge that gap. So I think a couple of people, I think we had one of the trials here earlier. So DCMS have funded over the last 5 years a large number of 5G test beds and trials, spanning all kinds of sectors from, I think we had a connected forest one here earlier, logistics, manufacturing, creative industries, health and social care. And they've been really successful at proving that the technology can deliver value. But DCMS are now pivoting, and they're going to focus on the diversification of the underlying hardware ecosystem. So how can we take these use cases forward to scale them and make them available to everyone? Well, from my position at Jacobs, we work with a number of market leaders, people like LA Airport, the New York University Medical Center, Network Rail, to help them deploy their own private 5G networks and start experimenting and scaling use cases. There's also examples of cities around the UK. Kind of Bristol is very commercially attractive, and they've really successfully engaged with commercial operators and secured widespread 5G enabled networks for themselves and their population. But what do you do if you're maybe not a market leader and you don't have access to the R&D budgets that will allow you to do this now? What do you do if you're not a city that is really commercially attractive? How can you still keep up? Because I think a lot of the negative consequences in those scenarios were due to people not having access or not having skills. So I think it's really important that we think about how we can provide equitable access to 5G. And at this point, I'll hand over to Lara, because that is what the Scotland 5G Centre aims to do.
So, if we want to enable this vision, we need to take action now. We need to create an environment for market education that allows people to understand the transformational power of 5G and what it can actually enable. We need to bring together the solution providers and the buyers at pace to connect and to understand each other and work in new ways to achieve these goals. Hello, my name is Lara Maloney. I am the head of S5G Connect at the Scotland 5G Centre. I actually oversee a series of 5G innovation hubs and testbeds. So, what is the 5G Centre? I wonder, that's what you're thinking anyway, the Scotland 5G Centre. We're the national centre for excellence around 5G, and we were set up and established by their founding partners. We focus on market awareness and the accelerated deployment of 5G private networks across Scotland. My particular focus, however, is on business engagement. How do I get businesses to engage with the hands-on services that we provide that help them achieve their 5G goal? So how do I help that business to understand how to benefit from 5G? How do I help that business to do research about 5G? Or how to understand how to make cost savings or productivity gains that are of benefit for them and for the Scottish economy? So the S5G Connect programme itself is actually the foundation to that 2040 vision. At the Scotland 5G Centre, we believe it starts with regional, localised access and engagement so that people aren't left behind. We are creating and have been funded to create a series of 5G testbeds, and these are an asset for Scotland. They're accessible by public, private and academic sectors, and it's all free of charge. What that means is that other innovation centres can even take access to our 5G hubs and come and utilise that for their products and services in their own innovation centres. Companies can come to us and they can actually test their solutions from a 3G or 4G or an IoT application in a 5G environment, take them forwards and say, okay, we are building competitive advantage for the global marketplace. Think about the vision beyond just selling in Scotland. So how do you actually start such an endeavour? It's not that easy to create a whole sort of network from nothing. So you start with conversations, you find partners, you procure and you deploy the actual 5G networks. And that's not even as simple as it sounds, because 5G is a collaborative network. It's actually all about the different layers that you need to make it work together. You need to have people with the technical skills who can actually deploy, who can manage, who can configure those networks so they can actually be utilised. You need devices. You need people who make the devices. You need to have companies developing applications for 5G environments. And actually what we need is new business models to work in this sort of new enterprise market. So in terms of each hub that we actually have, it's designed based on either a challenge or an opportunity for that regional location. And that's quite key. Is it an economic opportunity because it's got a lot of investment from the regional deals? Or is it a problem that that region's really trying to solve? The hubs are also very strategically aligned with Scottish Government. So we're thinking about economic priorities, but we're also thinking about the digital ambitions of Scotland and how we can actually underpin that with connectivity. So this slide, a lot of information on it, but what I'd like to sort of reflect is that by building 5G testbeds, we're building the 5G ecosystem. We're actually bringing people together to add value to the Scottish landscape and beyond. In October 2021, we launched our first hub in Dumfries, and literally 2 weeks ago, we had the Governor of the Bank of England come to site in Dumfries, which I'm not even sure that many of you in the room know where it is. And we also had the Ministry of Defence come along with their accelerator in our 5G testbed, bringing people to a location that without that 5G testbed might not have been there. That's what it's about, making sure we don't leave people behind and we bring these hubs to new locations that are not the usual cities. Our partners in Dumfries are AWTG and Nokia with the NDAC solution. We've just gone live in both Aberdeen and in Halo Kilmarnock, which are more sort of entrepreneurial business environments, and they're partnered with Vodafone and Ericsson. Dundee and Forth Valley are both coming online very shortly, and I have 2 more hubs getting launched by September, which I'll be announcing in the coming months. They're new sort of technology setups as well. They're not the ones that we've used to date. This provides a range of opportunities for people to test in different technical environments. And that's quite key as well, because there's not just one 5G network, and there's not just one device that's compatible with it. In terms of what the network allows us to do, it allows us to forge partnerships, working new ways with different organisations, and work across a range of different sectors. And the sector foci are really important because it allows us to learn, it allows us to understand what works in one location and transfer it to other sectors. I don't know if that's coming back on. Can everyone see the screen? Because it just went off of mine. Okay, great. So the hubs themselves actually deliver a range of services. We focus on educating the market and assisting them to understand what a 5G network could do for them and how it can, to understand what problems we can help them to solve effectively. We get a lot of basic and also technical questions coming along, but from Forth Valley and Dumfries, the biggest two areas that we focus on are use cases. So number one, helping solution providers to actually test in a 5G environment. Are those screens just going on and off for everyone else? Okay, so they're just, it's testing that 5G environment. So just thinking about how can they evolve their product or solution. In terms of other use cases, the biggest aspect of businesses looking for their digital infrastructure. What can I do? If I built a 5G network, what would I use it for? What's involved with building a network? How would I even go about working that out so that when I go to the market, I'm asking the right questions to the right people? That's where we come in. That's where the Scotland 5G Centre provides services, and we actually support those businesses to develop their use cases. We understand the problem, we evolve the use case with them, and they can either test it in our 5G environment, and we can provide technical expertise and business expertise, or we have two pop-up 5G networks that we can take to site and actually test on their grounds, which, you know, if you're going to a port and doing it around a crane, they obviously can't bring that to our site. So we can be adapt and agile with helping these businesses to fill the knowledge gap. And that's the key. It's the knowledge gap. If we don't start supporting the SMEs that can't access through their own budgets or through their own networks at the moment, this kind of technology, those digital divides will continue. So we absolutely have to be open, accessible and inclusive at the Scotland 5G Centre. One of the more recent examples that I wanted to get a bit more specific on really is actually our Dumfries Hub. So this is how we're engaging and accelerating market engagement. We launched our first innovation challenge in Dumfries just in April, all around one of their biggest problems in the area, remote healthcare. How do I deliver remote health and care to people in need, especially in a time of such crisis after COVID? There are an estimated 700,000 unpaid carers in Scotland. So it's individuals like you and me looking after someone at home. 20% of them are over 65 and 4% are under the age of 16. By 2039, Dumfries and Galloway predict that they will have a 20% drop in the workforce that they have, which is already reduced because of their dispersed locality. And by 2037, they're predicting an increase of 73% the number of people with dementia. So you can imagine for that region how challenging that is. They have about 3,430 individuals with dementia right now, and that's going to be nearly 6,000 by 2037. So we have to find technological solutions to solve these very human and complex problems, because we can't just keep throwing people at it. What we did, let me move that on. So what we've done, we secured the endorsement and partnership from the NHS, from Dumfries and Galloway Health and Social Care Partnership and Scottish Care, which is a private member organisation that represents over 400 private care homes across Scotland. And actually, private care provision is much higher than everybody thinks. They always assume it's the NHS, but it's not. It's actually very much catered for by the private sector. We have them as challenge owners. We worked from their strategies to identify the problems that we could look at connectivity to solve. They work with us on the 15-week programme, supporting the winners of the challenge. There are 3 businesses that have been selected, and we're kicking off next week, so that'll be in the press then. And they are going to support those businesses all the way through those 15 weeks and post-challenge. And that's why I think it makes it more exciting than a normal sort of accelerator programme. CGI and AWTG are our partners for go-to commercialisation and market expertise, and AWTG are technical experts around 5G and its applications, as well as having experts around the healthcare settings. I was very adamant when we set this up that we weren't going to run an accelerator and then that'd be the end of it. After the 15 weeks, what we have committed to is driving these solutions into the marketplace. How do we take these winning companies forwards? So we will continue to provide access and services to the 3 winning companies. On top of that, I'm very hopeful that we are going to have 2 pop-up 5G locations in 2023, one selected by Scottish Care, a private care home, and a second one selected by the NHS to actually showcase the winning solutions in a real 5G environment, in a real health and care setting. On top of that, we will bring additional use cases in, and we'll be bringing a lot of new experimental, potentially technologies and things that we can test in that environment to create an output which is a playbook, which says to the private care sector, these are the applications that give you the highest ROI. These are the ones that actually solve this problem. This is what you have to do to get this set up, and these are the regulations you need to be aware of in a health and care setting. But it's also about forging those networks and partners together that help each other to learn across the Scottish landscape as well. Let's see, what comes next? Well, we're very, very busy, as I'm sure you can imagine. We've got quite a lot to deliver. I've got 2 more hubs that are going to be announced and deployed by September. We're going to be delivering an active and connected partnership of networked hubs and have this power of this aggregation of these hubs and all of these different sectors working together. The breadth of sectors actually allows you to focus in each individual location, but find ways of reapplying that learning across additional sectors. So what do we learn in oil and gas that we can apply to logistics? You try and repurpose and repackage and maximize the reach of that knowledge. We won't always get it right, I'm aware of that, but we will share the learning. And ultimately, I believe that what we're doing in terms of not being in just the known cities, but being in rural locations, by working with the outskirts of different towns and cities, as well as the key players in terms of the big commercial and corporate guys that we're also working with, I think we're able to then underpin that vision, the more positive vision for 2040, and actually deliver that for the benefit of Scottish citizens and business. So all that's left for me to say is that if you have a question about how 5G can help your business, or if you understand that potentially increased reliability, increased speed and performance, or increased security enabled through a 5G network can actually help you, then come and get in touch. My details are here, and I thank you for your time. Do you want me to stay up here or go down there? Okay.
Just join on stage for me. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So we've just got time for a couple of questions. So do we have any questions from the floor for our speakers? I'll do it, it's fun.
Both of the sessions are really excellent, especially the social value of 5G. On the second session, I have a question. I have seen a lot of your partners, but I have not seen the actual telecom companies who are investing billions and billions of pounds in 5G. Are you not closely working with the BTs and Vodafones of the world? Because they are actually trying to do something based on already their 5G investment and some of the use cases, what you mentioned. They have been trying to do that along with their partners. So are you not tying up with one of them?
So which particular companies? So we do work with BT and Vodafone.
Yeah.
Are you mentioning a few others there?
No. I'm in general talking about the telcos who are the 5G telco, those who are bringing in the core network and the connectivity part. And
yeah, so they were on there, so absolutely. We manage, and I'm going to have a network of 7 hubs by September, and that's just the start of the testbed network and the start of building that 5G ecosystem. Certainly, we have a range of other partners that are not mentioned there that work with the Centre, the Scotland 5G Centre, and they have a range of different sort of relationships and projects that we work on. I think we've just won the Frank bid, for example, and we do other projects as well. But that sits at the Centre level, whereas I focus on these more how to engage SMEs who want to build their own private 5G networks in the maybe not the core cities. So for example, we do partner with University of Glasgow, University of Strathclyde, other activities maybe in Edinburgh and Glasgow, but that sits at the centre level. Whereas I do more work around how to bring it out to the regions.
I was actually going to ask a question about the academic links that you have in terms of talk about sort of making it open and accessible. Could you just expand on those kind of initiatives?
So actually, the Scotland 5G Centre was founded by the University of Strathclyde, University of Glasgow, Scottish Futures Trust, which is digital infrastructure for Scotland, and Scottish Government funded. So those Wave 1 projects were covered a range of different areas. One of them, the University of Strathclyde, was a community toolkit. So they were actually up there in Orkney, putting up a 5G mast, which is not easy when you're a really remote island with some of the worst weather you've ever seen. And they had to ship all of the equipment over, they had to find sites, and we learned so much about what's the challenge of building 5G in an island, a remote island with bad weather. Biggest issues were you couldn't even work out who owned the land. Scotland doesn't have land registry, the same as in the UK. So they've created this whole community toolkit. So if you were a community or a BEMCOM, you wanted a community-owned 5G private environment, there's a toolkit that we are working with to help promote that, and we're going to be bringing that out more towards the end of the year. So that's the sort of output from that project that we're taking forwards, and we're still working with them. University of Glasgow, their Wave 1 project was all about actual sort of development of products and applications. So they actually work with us to demonstrate use cases at the hubs, because we have to engage people, right? People don't really understand what 5G is. They don't understand the applications of it. And if you're talking to an SME, they're very busy. They've got a lot to do, and especially post-COVID, people have enough pressures. So why am I going to think about this? And we utilise the live demonstrations that we've got our own robots, we've got drones that tour, we've got lots of different sort of medical examples. So they bring them to our sites and we can host events, very sector-specific, invite-only events, and we showcase what to do to try and drive that engagement. So that's the way we work with them. But other academic institutions can come along, and if they want to access our testbed, then that's not a problem. Please do.
Sounds very exciting. This is just a quick question for Hannah. So you talk about the. I couldn't help but be drawn to some of the negative outcomes. Maybe that says something about my personality. I don't know. But we did a charity walk at BizClick the other day, and I forgot my smartphone, and I was actually delighted about it because it wasn't going off in my pocket, and I felt it was a good thing for my mental health that my phone wasn't on me. So. What kind of solutions are you thinking? How I guess what I'm trying to say is there a charter or will there be some kind of ethics around how this stuff is developed so that it has to not impact too much on people's mental and, well, I guess it will probably save them their physical health, but mental health wise, are there any kind of regulations in place in terms of to protect people's mental health as this stuff begins to roll out like wildfire, mainly obviously with private sectors, but also obviously the governments will be doing it as well. And it almost feels like it's a juggernaut that can't be stopped. And largely a positive one in terms of how it creates efficiencies, but what's it doing to people's minds?
Yeah, I think I'll take what we're doing now, and then I'll go on to what maybe should be happening. But I think we are seeing progress. So I think London, I think last year or the year before, launched their data charter, which really clearly communicates to citizens how businesses will and won't be allowed to use their data in London. The likes of Amsterdam have done a similar charter, but for artificial intelligence algorithms used across the city. So you can go in, you can see exactly which ones are being used to maybe monitor your transport or whatever. And there's feedback mechanisms where you can say, oh, I really don't understand why that one's doing that. So I think some cities are starting to build bridges around kind of communicating what they're doing. I guess the regulation piece is, incredibly difficult. I think regulation has always tended to lag behind technology development. But I think at the moment, I feel 5G is quite technology driven. It's, what can we do with this new technology? And I think there does need to be some sort of social stream developing alongside of it to consider the impacts. Create the appropriate regulations where possible. But I think the talk that was happening over there before lunch, the Metaverse one, highlighted, some of the concerns with, maybe children accessing the metaverse, this new version of the internet, and the worries there. So it feels like regulation really does need to catch up. But I won't attempt to say what that
Appreciate I
should
put
be.
you on the spot there. It's quite a big one to tackle, that one.
Can I add a couple of things?
Absolutely, yeah.
Just in terms of interactive entertainment, if you think about right now, they still haven't managed to regulate social media. They still haven't done that. It's been around for ages. And I think that just shows the challenge of when new technologies are introduced, how far behind regulation is. In terms of, you also don't necessarily know the impacts of what's going to happen until it comes. We don't know necessarily what all the technology that's going to be designed or introduced that could be enabled by 5G, the way that people didn't know in 2010 what 4G would enable. We didn't know that Uber would be created or that WhatsApp would change the way we message. You know, social media didn't, Instagram was like 2011 or something, I don't know. You know, if you think about how much we've changed in the last 10 years, I think everyone has to realise that in an enterprise and industry setting, 5G will bring that, so that learning will have to come. But one thing I know that they're doing in esports, where effectively, if you were looking after your kids who were 14 and they were going outside to play with people, you'd be like, who are you playing with? What are you doing? They don't do that. But in esports, you can go online, you could be playing with anybody, you could do anything, and that's a huge industry that's going to grow. But I know that there are definitely regulations coming in there about how to control that environment differently and make it safer. And I know people are looking at that right now, which gives me some hope.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not an easy task. Well, thank you so much, Lara and Hannah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.